Go ahead.
Okay, so calling to order the meeting of the Finance Committee on November 13th at 5:30 p.m. We have a quorum, and I'd like a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion.
Okay, any discussion? No objections? Agenda is approved. I'd like to call a motion to approve the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting on October 16th.
So moved.
Okay, no discussion. Motion passes. And now we'll go on to report on contracts. I believe we have only one contract today, Catapult Learning. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Batista, Executive Director of Finance. I have Elizabeth Matson, as the Federal Programs Coordinator. We have before you a contract for Catapult Learning. As you know, or maybe you don't know, Providence School Department is the fiduciary of the funds for all the non-public schools that choose to participate. There's about 33 non-public schools that participate from Title I, Title II, Title IV. So any procurement or any vendor that those non-publics choose to participate in have to follow our procurement process and procedures. And all the expenditures flow to us. So for your consideration is approval for Catapult Learning that these non-publics will be using for tutorial services. So none of these services are in Providence schools that are also in non-public schools. And we are picking up option year 2. This was originally approved, I believe, in January of 21 with 3 years and 2 option years. This is the last option. Okay. Any questions?
Okay, Chair Aiken, do you have any questions or comments?
Actually, in regards to the private schools, can you elaborate? Are those schools here in Providence? Are they statewide?
Some, for Title I services, it could be any private school in the state that has Providence resident students at that school. So that's a Title I. The Title II and Title IV applies to non-public schools that are in the boundary of PPS.
So they might be religious schools. They might be-
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Providence Equal Day, so it's one of the Catholic schools that participate. So they have the option of choosing to participate whether they want to receive these funds. So they can opt in if they choose.
The contract states $1.2 million not to exceed. That limit, there's no total on the spending breakdown.
Yeah, there's just the dollar amounts associated with each section. So there is no potential budget for these non-publics. These are the rates that, but we know that we can't exceed 2 million. Sorry, that was a big.
That just makes it so that sometimes the funding, well, in the middle of the year when they finalize the federal funds, there's always an adjustment to the amount of funds for public and then
That
private.
trickles down.
Is this proposed budget, is it by student, or is it by school, or is it toggling between entities in terms of some of these services that they'll utilize?
Yeah, I'd say it's both, because it's about the number of students that can participate in those schools that they can offer the service to as well. So it differs per entity, given the number of students and given the services that school wants to participate in. So Elizabeth works with each of the 33 and develops program plans that has to be submitted to, under our consolidated resource plan to RIDE. It's a requirement that she consults with all those private parochials and deserves those program plans. This is all part of it. So it's a lot of work on our end, not only being in charge of the money, but also developing those, consulting with them and developing the program plans to be submitted. Because we are ultimately responsible if they follow the guidelines of the funds.
I just have to ask like a basic question. I just don't understand this contract. So the district is required compliance with Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The federal funds must be set aside to provide services to students, educators, families of private schools. Okay? So if the private school doesn't allocate their own funds to provide these services, then the public school system has to
Qualifying students.
for qualify.
Yeah, it's sort of similar rules to what we have here, and these need to be supplemental services. So it can't be anything that's required by law for those schools to do. So everything that we request on these program plans is based on a needs assessment at each private school and is supplemental to what they already offer their students. And then the dollar amount is determined based on, for instance, the number of low-income Providence resident students at that school. That's for the Title I piece.
When you say the dollar amount, you mean the dollar amount of catapult contract?
Well, the dollar amount of
total
services for that school under Title I, some of which is they desire to be tutoring by catapult, but
Some of it could be
not.
other professional development that you
Yeah.
choose for another. This is just one, catapult is just one area that they choose to use for these supplemental services.
So what are the supplemental services that catapult specifically? Is it listed here?
Yeah,
So a lot of it's education, tutoring services, small construction.
and we have, I mean, I don't have one copy, but you can have it. It's under Title I, it's mainly tutoring services, mainly direct services to students who are failing or at risk of failing academically. But also it could be for the teachers of those students or also for the parents and families of those students, just as in the public schools, Title I funds can be used for those purposes. For Title II, it's professional development for educators at the school. And for Title IV, just like in the public schools, there's sort of three buckets: well-rounded education, effective use of technology, and safe and healthy students. So what specifically Catapult does is they do professional development, they do the tutoring, and they have parent engagement trainings. And then they also have counseling services that might fall under Title IV. And they can also do more tutoring under Title IV, as well as one school, they do a supplemental robotics program.
Okay, so the federal law states that federal funds should be set aside. Like, are these, I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but we're not talking about federal funds here, right? We're talking about state and municipal funds.
No, federal.
These are
Federal,
federal
yes.
dollars.
Title, yeah.
Okay, so these are Title I dollars. Okay,
Title I, Title II, Title IV.
so how does that affect the larger PPSD budget and the deficit that we're facing?
Totally separate buckets of money.
Separate buckets.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, so
That's
state,
okay.
state aid and LEA aid, is a separate bucket of money, these are federal dollars under the consolidated resource plan.
Okay.
Title I, Title II, IDA, Part B, Title III, Title IV, where essentially these dollars are federal dollars, they must follow those students, even though they choose not to attend Providence public schools, they can attend a private school, but however, they're qualifying a student under ESSA.
Okay,
And these non-publics choose to participate in this type of service, supplemental service.
okay.
Right? Clear?
Yeah, I understand it now. It's the
It's
fund.
wacky.
Well,
It's strange, but
And complicated.
Yeah, it would be nice to have a map on that stuff, so I don't know the way that all these funds go through, but that is helpful.
it's just, so a private and parochial school, I guess this is what I say, a private parochial school can't apply for these funds on their own. They have to use the area. So
Okay.
essentially, we're not, they're part of our application because they can't apply.
Okay, and if
But a charter school can apply on their own.
a charter school can, yeah,
Yeah, but a private parochial.
cannot, so they would apply basically through the district
But the
to
rules,
access the federal funds.
what the rules are, they have to follow our procurement process and procedures because we're in charge of the money and we're reporting the dollars. So that's why, even though we have to come to you for approval because we're ready to check the catapult and our bank account. We're getting reimbursed for it, but we still, it's a problem.
So we're getting reimbursed, no
Well,
matter
not
what the
reimbursed,
demand
well-
is, whatever the demand is covered
Under Title I.
under Title I.
Under this.
Yeah, we're already committed to basically spending these funds for services at the private schools. The original amounts that are required that we determine based on the students, the number of students either at the school for Title II and Title IV, or who are Providence residents and low income and private loan. So that's sort of, all of that is determined last spring in terms of how many students are poverty students in Providence, and the dollar amounts get sorted out to how much each school can spend in each program. And then, we work through, well, what is your students' needs? And many of them in Title I, of course, want tutoring for those students. And we've been partnering with Catapult, the private schools really like them, we work well with them. So that's where we ended up determining which schools were going to be in this contract and what the services were going to be. And then the same process for Title II and Title
You mentioned tutoring services. Is this the high dosage tutoring services that are on Catapult's
Yes.
website? Can you describe what that means?
IV. That, the tutoring is, for instance, mainly, a lot of the students, well, unless they're high school level, that's a little different. But most K through 8, the students are being tutored in ELA and math, and/or math, depending on if they meet the criteria for being academically needy. And Catapult will contact the school and set up a schedule with that school and get the students and sort them into groups by grade level. And the high dosage would be more times per week. So, they might have 2 45-minute sessions, would be maybe a regular amount of tutoring per week per subject. And if they do high dose, they're going to do more than that, maybe 3, I would guess, maybe 4, but
Is there a
Like 3
maximum amount, like if a child needs, if they're considered needy in terms of development
a maximum amount of tutoring they can
Yes.
receive?
under the high dosage requirements?
I don't think so. I think it's generally like a 30-week time period, because usually there's the beginning of the year when they do a sort of an assessment to just make sure they have the final list of students. So I would say the tutoring usually begins around October and then usually goes through May. So you're talking approximately 30 weeks of tutoring. So, probably I would imagine that the maximum would be something like 3 hours per week for a student in one subject for 30 weeks.
Where is Catapult a national organization or a local organization?
They're national, and they actually, they produce like a report every year. I think this is last year's report, and measuring the student growth. Students who participated in literacy tutoring increased their scaled score by an average of 55 points from fall to winter testing. Students who participated in math average a scale score growth of 57 points from fall to winter testing. So they've really been effective.
And but the instructors are local,
Yes.
and are they the same instructors every year?
Sometimes, yes. I mean, that is basically what makes the most satisfaction for the school is when you have a consistency like that. So, if it's the same tutor, for instance, that was here last year, that's always helpful because they already know the students.
A little concerned about the length of the contract states it started on July 1st. We've already surpassed that date. It says it will go through June 30th, 2025. But then in the justification of spending item C states that the federal fiscal year ends on September 3rd. So is this where we talk about the allowance for emergency carrying over funds? How does that work?
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
you know, so we always want to align our contracts to our fiscal year, which was setting into society. The federal fiscal year starts 10/1 to 9/30. So there is a point that they can carry over their funds into the new fiscal year. Just a little bit. So they could have unspent funds that carry over that go into our new fiscal year, but it's still the same fiscal year with federal side.
And has that happened this past fiscal year? And how
They do, and they do offer tutoring during the summertime, which they are usually, so we consider them spending their old allocation. But it's not really, it's money, but we want to run our contracts up and not cross over to federal fiscal years. We want to have the money to our fiscal year.
I think it's important that we provide equitable services, because that's sort of the language of the law, is that we have to provide those students services that are equitable to the services that we're providing to the public school students. So if their students need a sort of a ramp-up program in August, we want to be able to provide that. And even sometimes they might want an extended year after school year ends to just help those students who are really struggling.
Jerry, do you have any further questions?
The only, as I say, the only concern I have is, the private schools. It's not really clear. I mean, if there was a listing of the private schools,
We can provide you the list of 30, just 33, right?
Yeah,
There's a list of 33 that chose to participate. Some, and it's weird too, some may choose to participate in Title I and not with Title II and Title IV. Some may choose to,
overlaps.
some might choose to do 1, 2, and 4. Some might just choose to do 2 and 4, not Title I.
And not all of them chose Catapult, so, but we can do a list that,
We can, I can send you the
Identify.
list of the 33 of schools that participate, and we can send you a list of the schools that just participate with Catapult.
Okay, so we can make a note of formally requesting that information.
I have no further questions than this.
Okay. Well, then I think I'll ask for a motion to approve the contract with Catapult Learning.
Yes, motion to approve with the listing.
Yeah, with the contingency that this listing is gonna come forward. Okay, and is there any further discussion of this contract? No. Okay, so, all in favor of approval of the Catapult Learning contract?
Aye.
Aye? Okay, the contract is approved. You're welcome. You're welcome. May I have a motion to adjourn the finance committee meeting?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn the meeting is approved. The meeting is adjourned. And thank you, everybody. Sure, you can.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. When you say, non-public, do you mean private, not including charter schools or including, not including charter schools, private parochial period?
That's kind of the charter